I feel absolutely honored to speak in this company, and I also see it as a continuation of a conversation that we're having. You mentioned the institute I work at, and of course I speak at an institute that has a different tradition, but we're working on ways ways of thinking about these institutional boundaries and whether they make sense now and whether they've ever made sense and how to think them together as well. So what is referred to as Dutch culture and what is referred to as the culture of the other. I think our project, and maybe our project here today also, is to find ways of how to think them together. I have to say, like Peter Schieder, I feel a little bit nervous about, or forlorn, you said, about speaking to an audience of museum experts, since I'm not a museum expert. I'm a social and cultural anthropologist, my work is on what could be described as the post-colonial Netherlands. Nevertheless, I hope I can say something useful to you as museum experts as well. What I try to do here today is to present some of my work, and through that work try to think through the concept of citizenship, so to interrogate that concept a little bit. Because in the call for, or in the conference call or the announcement, you said, or the organizers say, that we are interested, I quote, to think critically about how we might reposition the museums in the post-colonial moment when citizenship and belonging are in question. So that's what I'm trying to do is, and as you will see, museums will play a crucial role in my presentation, but what I'm trying to do is to question the notion of citizenship and to interrogate that a little bit. So the culturalization of citizenship in the Netherlands, that is the increasing importance ascribed to culture in the politics of citizenship, belonging and integration, has been marked by a tension between religion and secularism. The culture of others, and Muslims in particular, is here pitted against the secular, progressive and emancipated Dutch culture. Minorities are increasingly expected to integrate into Dutch culture and embrace Dutch norms, values and traditions. The process of integration here does not only mean to keep one's culture to oneself and out of the public sphere, but it is understood as a fundamental transformation of the person. Since they are thought to be caught in backward traditions, prospective citizens have to emancipate themselves. This process of emancipation, in turn, is told as a narrative of secularization. In his book Rituals, in his book on ritual citizenship, Oscar Verkijk has argued that, I quote, "In this narrative, the acting, willing, rebelling individual is central. Against the grain of society, the individual breaks with social conventions of his milieu, so as to let his personal autonomy flourish," end of quotes. In other words, the Dutch citizen is not only seen as emancipated, but this emancipation is understood specifically as an emancipation from religion. In this paper, I want to look at a process of emancipation that claims the opposite. Religion is emancipation. Here, emancipation is not understood as a process of secularization, but as a re-evaluation, indeed an embrace of religion. I'm talking here about the claims to citizenship articulated by post-colonial migrants, or more specifically, Surinamese Dutch of African descent. The paradigmatic shift to integration in the 1990s and the ensuing search for Dutch culture, cultural heritage and history has also turned up the so-called dark pages of Dutch history. And Alex van Ciprian has actually recently posed the question of what book actually has dark pages? No, that these pages are part and parcel of the narrative of the Netherlands, so they're not just the exception. Right? And I think speakers before me have emphasized that as well. In the early 1990s, Surinamese Dutch of African descent mobilized the colonial past, and in particular, the Dutch involvement in the transatlantic system of slavery to formulate claims to citizenship. As a consequence of slavery, they argued, they have been made citizens of the kingdom against their will. Now they should be treated as such, not as second-class citizens with limited access to education, housing, the labor market, and other areas of social life. The self-identified descendants of the enslaved see this claim to citizenship as a process of emancipation. Following many post-colonial thinkers like Du Bois, Fanon, Senghor, Said, and others, they argue that colonialism has created structures of power that reach into the present and cause psychological, social, cultural, and political problems. Yet in contrast to the notion of emancipation as secularization, they articulate a critical position that does not take for granted the norm of secular modernity. Instead, as I will show, in their claims to citizenship, the nation, and indeed modernity, secular and religious modes of binding and belonging intersect. On July 1st, 2013, the 150th Jubilee of the abolition of slavery in the Dutch West Indian colonies, the 150th Jubilee of the abolition of slavery in the Dutch West Indian colonies was celebrated at the National Slavery Memorial in Amsterdam. You can see this here. As every year, the ceremony was opened by a libation in honor of the ancestors. It was poured by Marianne Markelo, one of the most important priestesses of the Afro-Surinamese Winti religion in the Netherlands. For the first time, Markelo was accompanied by a newly created ancestor mask. Humberto Tan, a well-known TV personality and talk show host of Afro-Surinamese descent, introduced Markelo as follows. In Surinamese culture, rituals play an important role. For instance, the playing libation, a ritual in which the ancestors and God are called upon to provide assistance. And you will also see in a moment a mask. The mask is an expression of the African Renaissance in the so-called Winti culture. The mask, by the way, was made by Boris van Berchem. And in your attention, please, for the playing libation by Marianne Markelo. As she slowly walked around the memorial, pouring water from a calabash, and accompanied by a dancer wearing the mask, Markelo spoke the following words of prayer. And actually, the last time I gave this presentation was in a church, which sort of added an interesting layer to the prayer that I will read out to you now. Ancestors, God the Creator, Mother Goddess Maisa, ancestors, your memory is like water that purifies my spirit and activates my imagination. Ancestors, on this 150th commemoration of abolition, I want to say thanks to your struggle. I want to say thanks for everything you left behind for us in this history. Mother Earth, Mother Goddess, make us aware that the freedom to fight for freedom is important. Freedom demands commitment and dedication. Anana, Maisa, Mother Earth, God the Creator, today too I call upon you, come in our midst, stay close to us, let us find the strength to further develop the Netherlands together and in harmony. Slavery has known victims, perpetrators, as we say today, but we are concerned today with the future. After 300 years of experience with slavery, we are in this part of Europe, the beautiful black and white Netherlands. We are free people. Mother Earth, Maisa, ala den Yoka, ala den Bigisma Unu, Mekar Unu, so all the spirits, all our big ones, I call on you. So she switches between Dutch and the Surinamese Creole. Come in our midst, be with us, be with the politicians, in particular of the city of Amsterdam and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Give them wisdom to make difficult decisions in this time, which will affect all of us. But ancestors, you have done your share. Give us as your descendants the inspiration to also contribute to the further construction in a respectful manner, in a manner that is worthy of humanity and the history of the Netherlands. Harmony, freedom, we make a convent today that if we discover any form of slavery is emerging in our society, that we will fight against this. This is the convent of the 150th Jubilee of Slavery in Suriname and the Dutch Antilles. Thank you. 1 year later, on July the 1st, 2014, Markelo poured libation again at the memorial on the occasion of the 151st anniversary of abolition. When the libation had ended, a siren interrupted the ceremony. When Markelo had left the memorial ground, a group of young men and women of African descent had gathered swiftly in front of the stage. They were clad in black clothes, forming a block with grim faces. Through a megaphone, a young man read out a statement. "We are standing here today with the utmost respect and reverence for our ancestors. We are standing here in the name of Anton de Kom, Boni, Tula, Baron, Sophie, Jolicoeur, Tata, Karpata, Tuisson, Nanny, and the countless invisible fighters and victims of the Dutch wealth and welfare. We are here to see to it that no foreign breath enters their commemoration. The Secretary Lodewijk Asscher represents the Dutch government, the very government that treats the black community with disrespect, that wants no national commemoration of slavery, that ignores UN contracts, and that does not care about the pain and sorrow of the black community. We are here to prevent the Vice President Lodewijk Asscher from insulting our ancestors with empty words any longer, and even more so on a day that we commemorate their struggle and their suffering. Only a weak people allows such a humiliation. We are not weak. We will be a role model to our offspring, just like our African ancestors were assertive role models to us. We are fed up with being treated like second-class citizens, and we no longer want to matter only if the Netherlands deems us good enough. It's time to stand up for ourselves. We usher in a new era. We are Dutchmen like any other Dutchman, and we demand to be treated with the same respect." The performances by Markelo and the young activists articulate black citizenship. They address the Dutch state and its formal representatives in a discourse of rights and recognition. In other words, they intervene in what Jürgen Habermas has described as the public sphere. However, they do so not only as secular citizens, but by invoking the sacred, the authority of the ancestors. This intermingling of secular and sacred authority is underlined, or rather embodied, by the presence of the mask. So let me therefore now turn to an ethnography of this object. In 1998, Marianne Markelo received a message from her ancestors. In their message, the ancestors assigned Markelo to bring back the sculptural tradition in the practice of Vinti. The tradition, the ancestors argued, had been lost during the Middle Passage in slavery, and it was now time to restore this tradition in honor. I entered the project in late 2013 when I was asked to act as the project's chronicler. At that point, there was already quite a history to look back upon. 13 years after receiving the ancestral message in 2011, Markelo had made acquaintance with Boris van Berchem, a Dutch artist based in Rotterdam. Van Berchem had just finished a solo exhibition, and you see them both here, at the prestigious Museum Boijmans van Beuningen in Rotterdam. He described to me their first meeting at a Vinti Pre as a magical moment in which Markelo, guided by her African ancestors, chose Van Berchem as a partner in the project they came to call the African Renaissance and the Vinti religion. You see one of their performances here. In 2011 and 2012, Van Berchem made 6 ceramic sculptures of the Vinti mother goddess Mama Isa. However, the African-inspired sculptures he initially produced did not stand the test of ritual deployment when Markelo and Van Berchem used them in a Vinti Pre. The ritual had been prepared well. The event was organized at Van Berchem's studio on Brienenoord Island near Rotterdam, an island in the Maas River. The sculptures had turned out beautifully and could certainly serve as spiritual objects. Indeed, one of the sculptures is now part of Markelo's private altar. And they were also exhibited in the Museum of World Cultures in Rotterdam. The World Museum in Rotterdam, sorry. I'm getting confused with world and culture. So. Nonetheless, they were not yet perfect, Van Berchem said. They did not have the spiritual presence that he had aimed for. The sculptures, he said, were too static, just sitting there on the altar. They ought to be more dynamic, more alive, he said. During the ritual, Van Berchem did, however, have a vision of how the sculptures could be perfected. In his vision, he saw people dancing and wearing sculptures on top of their heads. I thought it would be more powerful if the sculptures were kinetic, moving instead of static. If they could actually dance among the people. But their project, Markelo and van Berkem's project, is not only a religious innovation, it is also the production of cultural heritage. It included not only the reintroduction of sculpture in the Vinti religion, but also the safeguarding of African heritage in the Netherlands. In 2013, van Berkem and Markelo collected more than 1,200 signatures against the commercial sale of the Rotterdam World Museum's Africa collection. The project received the name Ik ben niet te koop, I'm not for sale, a creed against slavery in general, and in particular against, as they call it, the unlawful sale of the Africa collection by the World Museum director Stanley Bremer, a waste of cultural heritage. That collection belongs to the people of Rotterdam, of which 20% have African roots. Then it dawned on me, van Berkem explained to me, we needed to go where the African ancestors live in the Netherlands, in the great African collections of Dutch museums. At that moment, he connected the dots, safeguarding the African heritage in the Netherlands and reintroducing sculpture in the Vinti tradition were two sides of the same coin. Hence, they approached the African Museum in Bergendal, where they visited the collection of Yoruba masks in the museum's depot. Guided by this, as they call it, spiritual character, this is the website of their project. Guided by the spiritual character of the objects, Markelo and van Berkem selected 6 Yoruba masks. The valuable wooden masks had to remain in the museum, but Markelo and van Berkem were not seeking to acquire one of the original masks. They were looking for a contemporary ancestor mask. For their project, simply preserving the wooden originals proved insufficient. The new mask needed to meet present standards and cater to present needs. The mask that had worked for the ancestors would no longer work in the present, but it nevertheless needed to make the ancestors present too. Van Berkem achieved this production of presence in the present with 3D technology. They found 3D Match Europe, whose slogan is "Make your imagination reality," a company that normally produces scans for medical purposes. The company performed a laser scan of the masks using a portable Artec 3D scanner, a device that dissolves a material object into point cloud coordinates, a mass of raw data that digitally defines the shape of the object. The raw data were computer rendered and then milled into polyurethane foam. So here you see the process in action. So they scanned 6 masks, and the computer rendered images of 2 masks so this is the material. It's a kind of building material used for insulation. And the computer-rendered images of 2 masks were used to produce one 1.5 meter high dancing mask, the Papa Vinti, 1 meter high sculpture of Mama Isa, and a small Cabra mask on which I will focus here. And Cabra is the Surinamese Creole word for ancestors. Okay, I'll skip a little bit. The Cabra mask needed to be a sensation. The new mask is considerably larger than the wooden original. What remained of the mask was only its shape. The most striking change is the mask's size. The original model was too small, van Berkem said. It would not have provided the kind of presence that we were looking for. Van Berkem explained that in an African village you have maybe 30 people, but we were looking for a public of 300 and more, and he added it had to do well on television. Van Berkem also radically changed the appearance of the mask. Instead of the original mask's wooden color, he applied transparent polyurethane varnish, through which the light beige color of the polyurethane foam is visible. And then he dressed the mask in blue and white cloth. And these are the colors of the ancestors. As we've already seen, the ancestor mask is also a political icon that intervenes in the debates about belonging, citizenship, and cultural heritage in the Netherlands. So it's a religious icon or a religious object that is sacralized in religious rituals. You see here a cabra praise or a worship of the ancestors. But it moves also. But it's also a political object that intervenes in debates about belonging, citizenship, and cultural heritage in the Netherlands. In 2013, the mask made its first appearance in the ceremony, as we've already seen. in the audience, and this here it becomes interesting for the museum people, Annemarie de Wild, curator at the Amsterdam Museum, was also in the audience, and she immediately resolved to acquire the mask for the museum's permanent collection, because as she argued, not only did the mask refer to the history of the city, since it had been present at this historic event, it had now itself become part of that history and thus part of the cultural heritage of the city. The mask is now part of the museum's collection, and here you see it dressed in the exhibition. But it also remains a religious object that is used in Vinti rituals. It is an object that moves in and out of the museum, and thus also between the realms of cultural heritage, religion, and art. The mask thus embodies the intersecting processes of heritagization and sacralization. It is a political object because, as cultural heritage, it symbolizes, if not embodies, a complex diasporic identity that is both in and out of the nation, both in and of the nation, to paraphrase C.L.R. James. It is a sacred object because it generates spiritual presence, the ancestors. So just in conclusion, I wanted to make 3 points. The intervention I presented here is issued from within what Paul Gilroy has called the counterculture of modernity. That is the fundamental entanglement of black cultures with modernity. The examples are presented suggest that in this counterculture, secular and religious modes of binding and belonging intersect. It invites, if not urges, a different understanding of modernity that does not take enlightened rationality and secularism as its self-evident foundation, and religion as its other. Instead, it directs attention to the complex dynamics of processes of secularization and sacralization in racial modernity. Second point, it invites what has been called a material approach that looks at the techniques of persuasion at work here. So the mask is what Birgit Meyer has called a sensational form, a technique of generating presence. In this particular form, the mask, the presence, the presence generated is a double presence. In the object of the mask, sacred and secular modes of binding and belonging intersect and critically relate. This means that we need to take seriously the role of religion in projects of emancipation. Such a position has been called a post-secularist perspective. Beyond the narrative of emancipation as secularism, so that this goes beyond the narrative of emancipation as secularization. But what does that entail? I mean, not only for the secularists who claim that you can only be emancipated once you're secular, but for those who believe that there is no yes, so not only for the secularists, I also mean to ask what this entails for the secular gaze of science and perhaps also the secular gaze of the museum, if there is such a thing. What does it mean to take religion seriously? And can this be done from a perspective of secular science or secular museum perspectives? What would it mean for science or the museum to become post-secularist? And I mean beyond just a critique of secularism. So these are the questions I wanted to raise. Thank you very much.